Hello and welcome to the 30th episode of When I Was Your Age, a podcast celebrating the careers, callings, and creativity of some friends of mine. I'm your host, Roland Parker, and as always, it is a joy, pleasure, and a treat to have you here. Today's guest is Hampton Dortch. I'm excited to chop it up with another podcast host. He is the founder of Wake Up and Lead. So we're going to talk much more about that as we bring Hampton into the stream. Before we do that, though, let's make sure we touch on our housekeeping as always. Make sure that you follow the Instagram at WIWYA pod. And thank you guys so much for the support. I do try to give you an update week to week on how many followers we've got. We've got 1,203, which is so great to see all the support there. Thank you so much. If you're listening for the first time, consider giving us a follow. You can do that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. If you're more a visual person, we've got episodes on YouTube as well that you can watch. You can find the links to all those places in the link tree in the Instagram bio. But I think that's going to conclude that piece. So let's go ahead and bring Hampton in. Hampton, how's it going with you? What's up?
Roland, I'm just fired up to be here today. That's all I have to say. I appreciate you having me on.
It's absolutely, man. Glad to do it. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about like how I found out is like you took a break from Instagram for a little bit, right?
I don't think I had an Instagram for like 6 years. Yeah, I deleted it fully.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I love that because I get like a recommended like person to follow, and I see maybe an update to like a Facebook like profile picture, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what Hampton's up to. And I kind of look at it a little further. I'm like, oh, he's had a podcast for a while. And I like go and look. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get him on. I need to check up with him for one. But it was cool to see like, oh, you've been doing this, and I just like had no clue. Made me feel bad that I like hadn't been tuned into it before.
Well, that's on me because I think I'm one of the only. A fun fact about me is that I got my quote start on social media through LinkedIn. A lot of people may not know that, but I deleted Instagram in college. There's a whole backstory behind that, and was like, social media is terrible. I hate it all. And then I remembered my LinkedIn password because I, was required to have it in college or something when I started working at my first job. And then that just led into me throwing some stuff up on there and have like grinded on LinkedIn for about 2 years. But finally I was like, you know what? It is time to jump back over to like Instagram and other stuff. So there's all these people that are like, dude, what? I didn't know you were doing any of this stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's probably because you don't get on LinkedIn because you're not 40.
I love that. Well, we'll touch on that a little bit more. I've got it up on the screen for you guys already, but if you're not, make sure that you follow Hampton and his new Instagram profile. It's up there, and we'll have it in the description as well. But maybe if you want to really get in touch with him, then you can go find him on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got some get to know you questions. We'll dive into those. So where are you from, and where do you currently live?
I am from Birmingham or Vestavia, Alabama, and I live in Vestavia, Alabama.
Nice, lovely. And what do you do? We can touch on all pieces here.
So I have worked for a company called WildSpark for really 4 years. I started at the beginning of 2020, and I guess technically I was in my last semester of college. Great timing, to graduate college. But I was interning here at the time, and WildSpark at the time had 7 employees when I started, and there's 20 now, and we do leadership development for other organizations. And we have like a software, an app that really helps lots of different organizations develop their leaders, because I think a lot of times people get promoted to a management role because they're really good at their job or they've been at an organization for a long time, but they're not really taught how to lead someone. And if you're going to be spending the majority of your waking hours at work, I would hope that you have somebody that is for you, that's leading you well. And so that's what we're doing. I've been selling WildSpark for 4 years, and that's kind of how I got into this whole podcasting thing too.
Nice, love that. So we'll touch on that a little bit more, but thanks for that. And then how old are you?
I'm 26.
Nice, lovely. So I'll give you a little background. That was the quickest answer that I've gotten in like the last 10 episodes. Because it seems like around this age, everybody's like, um, 26. But
Wait,
you answered very confidently. You're like 26. I know it right away. Boom, bam.
I
But like,
I think I'm 26.
sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to double back on it and have you second guess. But yeah, it was just funny that that I noticed that is I've seen a lot of people. It seems to be around kind of this blurry age of like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I
Yeah.
am. Um, so I'm seeing a lot of books behind you here. What piece of media are you currently enjoying? So book, podcast, music, TV show, anything that you're watching with the spouse or anything like that?
Mm. Usually while I'm editing my podcast and stuff, my wife Erica may have like the Bachelor on, or I never remember if it's the Bachelor or Bachelorette, and I just make fun of it the entire time.
Mm,
Um, but then all of a sudden I'll find myself like, oh, what's gonna happen? I'm like, what am I doing?
yeah.
So from a TV standpoint, uh, let's see. I've read all these books right now. I'm currently reading. I'm just starting. This is called The Power of Moments. It's
Okay.
going to help me a lot with my job. I can't really tell you what it's about because I'm just getting into it, but it's a lot.
Sure.
It's going to be a lot about like customer service and creating moments for people. Favorite book of all time, this tiny one, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. It's like $2 on Amazon, maybe 20 pages. That one's always good.
Nice.
And then I think this one right here, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, is by Clay Scroggins. I think for a lot of folks our age that may, have big goals and are ambitious, but maybe they're not quite the boss yet,
Sure.
that's going to be really helpful. So, I mean, I could talk about these all day long,
Nice.
but
Gotcha. No, I love that. So I'm seeing a lot that are kind of central and kind of leaning into that leading component. Anything that's outside of that, or do you have any fun reading?
So my wife again has told me, she's like, you should explore outside of sort of the self-help
Mhm.
realm. And so I would say probably another book I'm reading right now is Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. It's his brand new book. He wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And I mean, that's super good. So I'm like, even though that I wouldn't put it in the self-help category because it's like a Christian book, but it's
Yeah.
still like a self-improvement book. And so
Yeah.
there's not really a whole
It's
lot of
adjacent.
fiction or anything going on. I would say the funnest book that I have read would be the yellow one up here. It's called Fans First. It's by the founder and owner, Jesse Cole, of the Savannah Bananas. And he
Oh,
talks about his story. And I mean, but it still kind of like translates back to like business and customer service and all that. That book is sick though. I love the bananas.
nice. Yeah, definitely cool. I saw on their socials recently they had John Cena doing at
Yeah.
that, which was really cool. Yeah, talk about just like one of the more interesting stories like in like sports and like branding too. Like very interesting group. Like I'm so enthralled like anytime they like come across like my pages and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. They're pretty cool. I kind of started fangirling over them when something happened this is like a humble flex, but when I was like very early in my podcast, I like shot a DM to Jackson Olsen, who he plays third base for them. He's like all over TikTok. Guys that like are like guys that play baseball and stuff, like, probably make fun of him. I think he's super cool.
Mhm.
But he plays on there and has like 1 million followers on everything, and it's just like he loves like The Greatest Showman. So, anyways, he came on my podcast and it was awesome. I was like, oh, this is super cool. And so ever since then, I'm like, I love the Bananas. I want to
Yeah.
play for them one day, even though I'm terrible at baseball.
Nice. That's great. Well, that's cool to get that connection there. I like that we looped it back around to the podcast too. That's great. What's something that you'd consider a luxurious necessity?
Luxurious necessity. Wow, that's a great question.
I can give you some prompts too, like
I'll
maybe
give me
some
some
answers.
prompts. Give me some prompts.
So for the one that I always go to is a nice cup of coffee. Like it kind of blurs the line for me of what is integrated into my routine. And like I could technically do without it, but I'm still going to make sure that it's incorporated in some way. I've heard people say like technology, like last episode, which is not out yet at the time of recording, but Wesley, he said his like Apple like I forget the term for it, but like the watch, the AirPods,
Yeah.
the MacBook, the phone, like the environment, the ecosystem of that. He's like, I use it for work every day. It's like a really big piece of like my professional life and personal. So I want it to be upgraded and nice. So I make sure that I'm pretty like current with that. But yeah, I've to say cars as well. For like, if I'm gonna be spending a lot of time on 280 or wherever, I want to make sure that it's at least a nice environment that I'm sitting in. So does that spark up anything for you?
Yes. Mine would at this point in time fall into like the fitness bucket. Like I've got a watch, it's a Garmin, and not necessary. You don't need a nice Garmin to run. But of course I got like the newest one because I just thought it was sick and wanted a lot. And then I hesitate with sharing this because I think that people that are really trying to get into fitness usually look to buy some sort of a supplement. And I think that supplements are 2% at most of like success in the fitness world. But once you get the foundations right and, you know, workouts and everything, then they can certainly be helpful. So like I don't shy away from buying like a bunch of like Nick Bear stuff at Bear Performance Nutrition, like a lot of that. So that's not necessary by any means, but I don't shy away from that stuff.
I get you. Yeah, I think when it comes to fitness, a lot of the components and pieces are like building blocks first, and then like you can get a little further into the optimization of, you know, like, all right, let's throw in some of the extra pieces here. Like, do I really need a pre-workout? Or like what, and like all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like the most important piece is like, are you moving? But then like, you know, figure it out from there. A lot of people like to argue on like, oh, like you got to do this kind of split, or like, like if you're doing chest only, or so it's very interesting to hear people talk about it. But just like go at least move first and then figure it out from there.
Yeah, no, I mean you can get in the best shape of your life by picking up a rock and walking up a hill. Like so, you know, if you want to get in really good shape, move more, eat less, and that's it. Or you might need to eat more depending on your situation. But anyways,
it's see a nutritionist and a coach about it if you're really interested. We're not professionals there. We'll leave that to them. Do you have any bits that you're doing? So running jokes, maybe humor that you have kind of only for yourself, or inside jokes with close friends, significant other, anything like that?
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. I've just not even been asked that before. Dude, this is great. Cause I know you have 2 daughters, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I've just had my first daughter, and like, I'm already just turning into like a freaking dad, like where I'm just, anything that I do is probably not that funny, but like, I think it's funny, or my wife and I might think it's funny. Like, this is so dumb. And I cannot believe I'm even saying this, but it's the first thing that came to my mind. My daughter's name, she's like 4 months old. Her name is Mary Collins, double name. Yes, of course, we live in the South. Like, you know, Mary Collins, double name. After she takes a bath every night and I'm like putting her down to put her clothes on, there's a mirror right in front of there. And one day I looked at her in the mirror and I was like, hey, it's Carrie Mullins instead of Mary Collins. And for some reason, I thought it was so funny. So now every night we like, just because she's backwards in the mirror. And it's not funny. And there's probably a lot of people like clicking off of this podcast as I'm sharing this. But like that, I wouldn't say I'm like a funny guy, but that's what I laugh about these days.
I love that. Well, so I'll share one that I've been doing recently with my kids is like, we frequently take them to the childcare, like at the gym. So like Tabby will take them in the morning and I take them in the afternoon after I'm wrapped up with work. And on my way back in, I started doing this. I don't have a good reason for it, but like it's funny to me now, and I'm going to keep doing it. Is as we're pulling like into our neighborhood, like we're on like our main road and like we're about to like make the turn in, I start like chanting. I'm like neighborhood, neighborhood, and they just join in and do it. And like when we like finally make the turn in, and we're like, yay! Is there like it's I don't know, why, but like I think that there's something really funny and important about like doing silly stuff that doesn't mean anything.
Mhm.
So that's been fun. That's one I've been enjoying a lot lately.
Oh man, that's good. Yeah, people that don't have kids right now are probably like, "What in the world?"
What?
That
Yeah, it's a exercise your bits, everybody. It's if you got one or you're interested in trying one out, just do it. It won't cost you anything. Um, so I've been enjoying asking this question too because we take all of the answers and compile them into a playlist, so you can go back and find it. But given the opportunity to replace the national anthem with any song on your playlist, what would that be? And tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, wow. Give me like a couple answers people have
Sure.
said. I just want to hear.
All right, so here's kind of how people have generally taken it. We go for kind of the funnier route. So Lily Willingham, she said it would still be the national anthem, but the um, only the version as performed by Fergie in the NBA Finals, which was pretty famously terrible,
Yes.
and stuff like that. So I think that is one route that you could go. I asked my college professor this one time, and he said, "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie. So it was like, okay, nice. That's very in tune with some of the patriotic themes. It's and kind of diverts like in your own way. There's the environmental piece too. So is I liked his answer a lot because it wasn't just straight up silly. But yeah, I've also had like "My Humps" by the Black Eyed Peas was one of the first answers that we got. So generally too, I think about if I was at a sporting event and that we're called to rise for the national anthem, what would be the funniest thing that I could hear over the stadium speakers? And
Got it.
generally, so I think of that a lot. But like I don't want to commit you to the silly corner. If you feel something that would be a genuine good answer too, then I'd love to hear that as well.
All right, I have it. I just told you I'm not funny, and I'm steering away from the funny route here. The answer to my question is for two reasons. One, I think it has even more meaning than the national anthem. And two, you know this from high school. I'm like a music harmony
Mhm.
junkie, and so this song is like the best in the world at like being able to sound really good. The doxology would be my answer for sure.
Oh, love it. Any
Uh,
particular version that you kind of look to?
um, no particular version. Because you have to put it on a playlist.
It's a I'll find whichever one, but like I want to know if there's one that you kind of like resonate with a little bit more.
Um, th- this has I don't want to discriminate by any means, so anyone listening, please do not be offended. But particularly, I don't know the version, but I would love like a massive men's choir
Oh,
singing it.
nice. Yeah.
So that
Uh,
where I'm sure that's somewhere.
yeah, it's absolutely. We'll be on the lookout and kind of filter through the versions there. I love that. And then last question is, how do we know each other?
How do we know each other, man? Where do we start? Let's see. I mean my dude, and I'm sorry if you get this wrong. I feel like my first memory would be I came to Vestavia in seventh grade. Our
Mhm.
middle school was called Pizitz, weird name. And I just remember running cross country / track, and you were in eighth grade. So I was a year behind you. And I remember first meeting you there. And then, like in high school, I feel like that continued. And then I also remember you doing choir at some point. And
Mhm.
I mean, just knowing you from school, really.
Yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
remember the Bible study we did, which I probably knew all the right answers to, but wasn't living out at the time.
Sure.
Maybe my junior year, your senior year, or no, my sophomore
Yeah.
year, junior year at the yogurt lab, maybe.
Mhm. I distinctly remember doing that. It was kind of started or maintained at least by Corey and Mac.
Yes.
I felt like a certain responsibility to carry that on. like after they had graduated. But yeah, I just remembered what you said about choir. So I hadn't done choir until my senior year. I like didn't have any fine art credits. So I was like, dang, what could I cram in? And men's choir was like a half credit that you could do like during like a lunch period. So like all of the other seniors like who had like, stayed on top of their stuff, like they were getting their extra long lunch like in on like the senior patio and stuff. And then I had to cut mine short to like go do men's choir. But because of that, I got to go to New York and like perform at Carnegie Hall, which is like super cool. And I loved getting that experience. And it was just like a fun trip in general
Yeah.
to go kind of in that setting. But yeah, we were roommates and on that trip.
Yes, that's right, dude.
Love that.
It's been a long time, man. I've been through a lot, but that was seriously amazing. That was a great trip.
That was a great trip. I loved it. That's awesome. Well, that's great. That just kind of came like flooding back to me, like in talking about it. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind until you said choir, and I was like, this is like that's so Raven, like the like vision like bleeding in. I love that.
Dude, I haven't been to New York, I guess, since what? That was probably 2015. So it's almost been 10 years since I've been. And the last time I went was with you, and you were my roommate. How special is that?
That's awesome. That's so cool. I also have not been back since then, really. Which I guess means that my 10-year like high school reunion is coming up soon, which is that's a jarring thing to think about. I don't even know what it looks like. I'd like to be involved in some way in planning and facilitating that. I think that'd be fun. Okay, well let's dive into your story a little bit. Let's my first question is how'd you get started with your podcast? But you mentioned Wild Spark, and that kind of piqued my interest. So tell me a little bit about Wild Spark, because to me it seems like that leads into how you got started with the podcast. But let's start there.
You're exactly right. Landing at Wild Spark out of college, I say I'll have to be very careful, because aside from coming to know the Lord, meeting my daughter for the first time, marrying my wife, I really have a hard time thinking of maybe anything in my life that I'm more grateful for in my extended family. So top 5 best thing that's ever happened to me, Wild Spark is in that top 5. And I interned there in 2020 in my last semester of college. And then when COVID hit, I wanted to work here so bad, but we were a startup, and obviously the world was kind of shutting down. And so it's kind of a fun joke now, but I stayed on as a quote expanded intern, where essentially I worked 40 hours a week for $10 an hour. And I don't regret it at all, because I was like, I want to stay here. So I did that for 3 months. And then I was about to get married in like 2 weeks. And I was like, hey, do I have like a job here? And then they like fully brought me on, and it's been like amazing ever since. I've done a couple of different roles here. But again, we do leadership development. We've done a lot of work with Chick-fil-A over the years. They're in the business of people, and they do it through chicken sandwiches. If anyone's wondering why is Chick-fil-A so successful, yes, their food is really good, but it's literally all about people, leadership, and culture. That's it. That's like the difference between them and everyone else. And so done a lot of work with them, and then really every other industry. And so I've been just hearing about leadership. And I personally, working at Wild Spark, have been poured into a lot, because you would hope that if we are helping other organizations develop their current and future leaders, we were doing that ourselves. And so as I looked around at my organization, as now we have, 20 people, and I saw my manager and his manager and his manager, which was, our CEO, I felt like they were truly advocating for me and cared as much, if not more, about my success than theirs. And they genuinely were servant leaders to me. And that was like, wow, leadership is not just standing in front of a room, like motivating, inspiring people. It's putting others above yourself and helping them be the best versions of themselves. And so I experienced that. But for 4 years now, I've been on calls like this, where I'm talking to an HR leader. And again, I said this earlier, they've promoted people to manager because they grew really fast. So the person knows a lot about the thing. And basically what's happening is they're asking a star quarterback to become head coach. And those things typically don't transfer. And so then all of a sudden you have someone showing up to work with a manager who probably has hopefully good intentions, but they just have no idea how to handle conflict and give feedback and build trust and lead a team and have emotional intelligence and all those things. So you asked me how I started my podcast. I'm now going on a rant about Wild Spark here. But all that said, I came to realize you don't have a shot at leading other people one day if you don't know how to lead yourself. You've got to know how to lead yourself in order to lead others. Because if you're not leading yourself, you're not going to be worth following, you know? And so I started thinking at the time of my podcast, I wasn't in like a formal leadership position at work. And so I was like, well, personally, I want to be ready for when I step into that spot, because I think a lot of times people are killing it in high school and college, and they do SGA and extracurricular activities and sports. And then you start your job and you're at the bottom of the totem pole, and you spend 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 years just kind of doing the thing. And by the time you end up in a manager role, you've probably forgotten some of that youth and that enthusiasm that you once had. And then the cycle continues. And so for me, as we're in this in-between stage, I was like, let's maximize this time of being responsible for no one other than ourselves, and learn how to lead ourselves so that when we get into a leadership role, we'll be able to lead other people better. And so that's where my podcast is now. It is truly to help ambitious young professionals learn to lead themselves so that one day they can lead other people in and outside of work.
Nice. I love that. And yeah, it's something that you mentioned really resonated with me for the thought of in working at summer camps, I feel like I developed a lot of leadership qualities. I think like when you work in that environment, especially, outside with kids, in in some spaces that require it require leadership qualities. Like you got to keep them safe, you got to keep the activity moving, you got to be fun while you're doing it. It requires some skill, and it's a muscle that you have to flex and grow and develop. But it can atrophy too. Like you mentioned, like the people who started out doing like SGA and all of these stuff, they're really plugged in, really involved, leading in a lot of different capacities. But then you hit adult life and you're at the bottom of the totem pole again. Then if you're not doing something to maintain it, at least, then it can be hard to step in and be like, oh shoot, I'm maybe not as good at this as I once was. Which is, I don't think that we anticipate that. We think that we're, gonna be leading in the same capacity as we always have, which is great. So tell me then, what are some strategies that you would help employ with like a client? Like here's some things that we can help to grow that if you've never had it, or reignite it if you lost it.
Yeah. So Wild Spark, we have an app and an online platform. And, if an organization is thinking, okay, we need to develop our leaders, there's a couple things they might do. They might spend a lot of time, energy, effort, and resources developing some sort of program on their own. And if they pull that off, then that can be great, because maybe it's like customized to like their organization and their values and everything. And in a perfect world, you have all the money and time and resources, and you can make that. A lot of times that's not an option, or unfortunately, they try to do it and maybe it isn't that good and it doesn't work. So that's one option. Another option might be, hey, we're going to hire a coach or a consultant, but a lot of times that's expensive, and that ends up being someone that is primarily working with executives, which is great. But I think the layer of an organization that you have got to hit is those middle managers, because they're having to lead up and they're having to lead down too. Middle managers, high potentials as well as if you can, because I don't want my listeners of Wake Up and Lead to rely on their organization to develop them. I want them to lead themselves. But in a perfect world, you're working at an organization that expects you to learn and grow. And so maybe they have something like a Wild Spark and you're kind of doing stuff on your own. That's a perfect world. But all that said, there is way too many books, way too many podcasts, way too many TED Talks, YouTube videos. Information is not the problem. There's too much of it. But information without action is just entertainment. And I can't tell you how many books or podcasts I've listened to that you kind of get that, that's good. And then you just forget about it. Or you're in the church service and you're like, man, that's good. And then you're like, I'm hungry. And then you forget about it and you go to lunch. And so what we found is, and we didn't come up with this. I mean, for me and you who have grown up in the church, you listen to a sermon and then you go with a small group and you talk about that, because why? Growth happens best in the context of community. People learn best in circles, not rows. And so through WildSpark, the way that we've scaled it is an organization may have 100 managers, where once a month through an app, we're in 2024. So there's micro learning where you watch a quick video that WildSpark made, and then you watch a quick clip from Ted Lasso, and then you watch a quick clip on Phil Mickelson and his, commitment to excellence. And then every month you're doing just a 30-minute lesson, and it's gamified so people get competitive with each other. But then the most important part is you are put into a small group with other people in your organization to have a conversation based on what you learn. So if you go through a lesson on, okay, here's how to have a tough conversation, as a leader, and here's some very practical resources to do that. While you're going through the lesson, you're probably going to be thinking, wow, this is really good, but you're also really busy. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, at the end of the lesson, write down what your action step is going to be. And then at the end of the month, you're going to come together with a smaller group and actually talk about this stuff. And we've just found that focusing on the consistency over intensity works a little bit better, because there's a lot of mountaintop experiences. You could pay a couple grand to send somebody to a conference, or for our listeners, in high school, you could go to, a JH ranch, which by the way, I know people have gone to that, and it has had like an amazing impact. Like, I think that like church camps and all that are amazing. I've gone to them and it's been great. But if you rely on the 3-day weekend or the week-long trip in a beautiful place with all the aesthetics to carry you through a year, you're fooling yourself. You need something to sustain you. That's like going to a workout intensive for 2 weeks and saying, all right, I'm good for the year. And so we will never say that an intensive or a conference or something is bad, but we really want to give people like something that takes, hey, this is 1% of your time a month. And if you stick to that, you will slowly continue on this path of learning.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that I've heard you say on your podcast before, and I love the way that you laid it out there too, with the consistency over intensity. It's something that you see in fitness a great deal. Is if you pick and find something that you can do consistently, once a week, twice a week, whatever it is. Then it's the growth is well sustained, and it's much easier to maintain that. I've seen some scientific literature on this as well, just like the psychology of it. If it's something that you're maintaining versus like, all right, I'm gonna go out there like once a month and I'm gonna bench as much as I can. It's like, all right, that's great, but like if you bench and like prioritize that like once or twice a week and did it like in a much more sustainable way, like you're gonna see much higher potential than just like if you go in there every once in a while and like ego lift or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think one of the harder parts about that is that, and especially for our generation, and especially ones younger than us, it's going to be even worse. We're handed all of this immediate gratification through Amazon and social media. And so we've lost the art of hard work. And one of my favorite, I didn't make this up, I can't remember where I heard this, but like, if I had to get a tattoo, I don't have one and I probably won't get one. But if I had to get one, I might write something like bore your way to success. That's kind of a lot of words, but I think the boring work is so powerful. If you can find a way to do the boring work in whatever it is, fitness or your job or your relationships, that's what it takes. And the funny part is I think we all know what that boring work is that we need to do. Yeah, at some level, there's a lack of education with fitness stuff. Yes, I could give you some super practical tips, but at the end of the day, we're typically looking for a silver bullet or an easy button, and they never exist. And the boring work is usually what it takes. And you've got to find a way to entertain yourself or just stay disciplined to do that boring work in whatever it is in life. And then you'll be a quote overnight success after 5 years, and everyone will ask you, what did you do? What was your workout routine? And it's like, man, I did the boring work.
That's that's so funny. And not to fall back into the fitness comparison again, but like generally we know like what is required in order to like be in good shape. Like it's consistent work, like doing some things that are challenging, elevating your heart rate and stuff like that. And it's generally not the really off the wall, like brand new, like guys, we've been doing this all wrong. What you need to do as you focus on this specific technique and like you do one really, really intense set of like really focusing on the negative portion of the movement. It's like, well, no, probably not. It's like there's no magic like technique or whatever. Like you got to maintain it, do it consistently, and something that you can integrate into your lifestyle. So yeah, I love that. Well, all that to say, tell me how that led into your podcast. We're 35 minutes in. We're just now kind of getting started with it, but I think it's really important to note what all influenced the thinking there and how that came about. So tell me about it.
Yeah, appreciate you asking. I started a podcast. Let's see. It was in the middle of 2022, and the original intent was to help me sell WildSpark. And so what I was doing was interviewing mostly CEOs and asking them their take on leadership development and the importance of it and what they're doing. And that actually ended up leading to a lot of conversations, and people were buying WildSpark. And I was like, oh, this is great. But then I was kind of like, I feel like there's a lot of podcasts that are like mine. There's a lot of leadership podcasts that are, in fact, much better than mine. And so I don't know if I'm adding an enormous amount of value to the world, other than, of course, enjoying the networking and it's helping me with WildSpark and stuff like that. And so then I went on this stint for a little bit where I was only interviewing people in their 20s. And I was kind of talking about don't waste your 20s. That was sort of my thing for a little bit. And that was fine. But then I started realizing us in our 20s, there's a lot that we don't know. And there's a lot of wisdom that I might be missing out on. And so then eventually I actually listened to this podcast, which I think you would really like. It's called Grow the Show. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a guy that talks about how to make your podcast better. And he said some pretty convicting things to me or to the listener that made me just think about I basically asked myself the question, would I listen to my podcast? And everyone that I've had that's been a guest, I love you dearly, and you all have been great. It's not you, it's me. There were some moments where I was like, I actually don't know if I would listen to mine. So then I was like, what would I listen to? And then I was like, well, immediate gratification, micro learning. We live in the world of reels and everything. So I was like, I'm going to do a daily podcast. And what is it? And then I wanted to have like a little bit more structure. And so I was like, what am I passionate about? What is my life? Like, I do this at WildSpark. And so I basically landed on, okay, I'm a young professional. You've got to learn to lead yourself if you want to lead other people. There's a lot of people that are in this in-between phase right now where you've graduated college if you went, maybe you didn't go, and that's totally fine. But you're like, what do I do with my life? What's my passion? What's my purpose? Am I going to start a business? Am I going to get promoted? And regardless of what you do, if you're not leading yourself, then I don't think your future is as bright as you want it to be, because I don't believe that you can just kind of stay the same. You're either growing or dying. And so I think that we need to prioritize learning and growing. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be a daily podcast for ambitious young professionals who want to learn to lead themselves. And so then I'm not a pastor, but I landed on just kind of like a simple framework, and they all stand with the letter F. Fun letter to choose. Interesting choice. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a 5-minute episode every day. Sunday is going to be on faith, Monday family, Tuesday fitness, Wednesday fellowship, Thursday future, Friday is going to be a Friday guest, and then Saturday is going to be my quote findings from my guest. And that is the framework I've landed on. I've recorded like 3 months worth of episodes, but we're only about like 2 weeks in at this point. But I'm loving it. It's a bunch of fun. I feel good about it.
Nice. That's great. Okay, well, tell me that about the pivot. What were the challenges that you faced in like going from the original formatting to this new thing? Because you mentioned that it's kind of recent. But tell me about it. That seems so interesting.
Yeah. Craig Rochelle says if you wait for all your ducks to be in a row, it'll never happen, or you'll be too late. And Roland, I don't want to speak for you, but if anyone thinks that Roland or I have it all together with our podcast because, we bought a microphone and post online, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, 100%.
But like, and so for me, it actually took me over a year and a half to get to where I actually feel like I have something that I'm like genuinely proud of. Not that I wasn't proud before, but I was like, I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm doing what I'm calling learning in public. So it's not like I'm coming on here trying to pretend to be an expert, a year and a half ago or so. And I found a lot of peace in a Winston Churchill quote where he says, in my 20s, I worried so much about what other people thought about me. In my 40s, man, I finally quit worrying what people thought about me. And then in my 60s, I realized that no one was thinking about me in the first place. And I was like, man, any fear I have, whatever, of what someone might think of me doing a podcast, like, man, everybody's thinking about themselves. And I feel like this is something that I'm passionate about and I really want to do this. And so, I was on a run. That's where like all my ideas come to me. I was running one day and it just started flowing, like this idea. And really, I had been thinking about this for probably 2 years before I even started my first podcast. I just didn't know what it was, but it took starting the podcast, learning the skill of interviewing people, learning what resonates to kind of get me here. And so a lot of people listening to this, maybe you're not going to start a podcast. I don't care if you start a podcast, but I think whatever it is, the thing, like, stop reading books on it, stop watching YouTube videos, just start it, because you'll learn way more doing that. And so for me, again, starting the podcast led to learning a lot of the different things. And then finally this idea came up, and it was the last week of the year and I didn't have a ton going on at work. And so I also have another daily podcast with my VP of operations at work, where it's a 5-minute episode on like how to be a good leader, middle manager. It's called the Leadership Spark. Mm-hmm. So I've experienced doing a daily podcast there. And so I was like, you know what, let's just rip it. And I'm going to record 3 months worth of episodes over this 2-week period where I have this time window so that I can't go back. And so I just did it. I wrote out all the different topics I was going to do. And there's maybe a little bit more likes and ums than I would like in some of the episodes, but I've just found that, again, by starting, you make it a lot further than thinking about all the different things that you maybe could do, and then you might end up not starting ever.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I had been tossing around the idea for my own podcast for a while, and I just like felt like I was like, we're in the middle of the move. It's hard, like with the girls, and like I had a friend, Jackie. She was on the podcast pretty early on, actually, and we had talked about it, about like the idea for the podcast. She's like, "That sounds so cool. Like, you should do it." And like a couple of months later, we were talking about something else, and she was like, "Hey, like, are you like still gonna do that?" Like checking in, and it it was really, really nice, for her to be able to like check in and say like offer that up, because I was a little bit paralyzed too in the thought of like I need to make sure it looks this good or is whatever. And then I was like, no, like what's more important to me, like creating something that like just period, like at all, or like making it completely perfect, like, and like never coming to fruition. So it's reassuring that you had a little bit of that experience as well, because I don't know, but after having that conversation with Jackie, it helped me. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go buy a mic and I'm gonna buy a webcam, and then from there that helped me, because like within the next week I was like, all right, I'm gonna start reaching out to people and seeing if they would be a guest, and then like get on Canva, do like some of the some of the graphics and stuff. It was like it was helpful. It can be really hard to get that going initially. So I loved what you said about making that happen. So gosh, that the daily piece and like planning like so far in advance with like all of the different content, I feel like I would run out of stuff to talk about. So like, was there any kind of like writer's block that you had to work through?
Not really. And that's not because I'm a wealth of knowledge by any means. It's really more of the job that I've had at WildSpark for the last 4 years. I mean, we're talking about leadership development every single day. And a lot of the stuff I talk about is a little bit more leading yourself than leading others, but it still all applies. And so I've spent years doing that. I've also read a lot of books, which has helped with stuff. And I have listened to a lot of podcasts, and people don't really know this, but like I posted on LinkedIn for 400 days in a row in 2022. And so it's not like all these ideas just came to me. It was practicing and failing over and over and over again. And I think that that's why I'm just encouraging others to start whatever the thing is, because you probably won't have the idea until maybe 2 years later. And again, I'm probably going to look back at the podcast I'm doing. I'm already thinking 2 years down the road, or really 6 months down the road, where I'm like, man, I'm kind of thinking at this point, I'm going to want to do this. So by no means have I arrived, but I would just say I've spent a lot of time like learning and practicing this stuff for the last couple of years. And a lot of this stuff are things that I wish that I could say in everyday conversations, but people don't necessarily want to be preached at. And also a life principle I really try to embody is to be interested over interesting, at least in real life. And so when I have a podcast and a screen, I can kind of talk to each episode is, targeted towards someone. And sometimes that someone is me. I'm not going to tag, who it's targeted to. Yeah. So just a couple
of
years.
An altar call on the on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Well, what resources do you look to? You mentioned that it can be, when it comes to leadership, it can be difficult to kind of wade through all the different material because there's so much, we're inundated with it. But what resources do you kind of look to? I imagine that a lot of like mentors, like at WildSpark or otherwise. But tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, from working at WildSpark, we develop a lot of our own leadership content. We're not like making up new leadership principles. There's nothing new under the sun with leadership. And so, we kind of have our own flavor with it. And so I've learned a lot from there. And then my CEO and VP of operations here and director of sales, like I'm learning a lot from them. I've got a couple of different mentors that I meet with that I learn a lot from, my dad. So just kind of conversations there. But from like a podcast standpoint, my favorite leadership podcast, other than the Leadership Spark, of course, which is the other one that I do.
Nice.
And I'm talking, this is about like for leading others, would probably be Craig Rochelle's podcast. I mean, it's pretty great when it comes to leadership. So I've learned a lot of stuff from there. Also LinkedIn. Hey, look, don't knock it till you try it. A lot of people I encourage, hey, replace Instagram and TikTok with LinkedIn, because most of the things, and it's kind of funny, there's a lot of like Reddit threads making fun of people who post on LinkedIn because everything on there is like kind of inspirational and cheesy, but you can learn a lot from getting on there. And so I've learned a ton from there. I've learned a ton from these books. And so I guess if I look at like the Faith, Family, Fitness Fellowship and Future Faith, a ton of that I'm just learning from my church, my pastor, Miles, a couple of different faith podcasts that I listen to. I listen to a lot of John Mark Comer as well. Family stuff. I mean, I'm becoming a dad. Well, I am a dad, but like a lot of what I'm sharing there is just stuff I'm learning from like my own experience and then like mentors that I have. Fitness is my biggest hobby. And so I've learned a bunch over the years from that. And then I have like a couple of like, influencer friends that like I learned from. Fellowship is probably just sharing what I've learned from truly believing that the quickest way in life to suffer is to try to do it alone. And so through other like men's groups I've had or community groups at church, I'm just sharing like what I'm learning from there. And then Future, that one is really one that I feel like I'm sharing a lot of just my stuff on, because I have seen so many people chase the path of earning as fast as possible. And while, yes, we need to make money, I would urge people, especially our age, especially like young professionals, to learn before you earn. Obviously, you have to learn and you have to be able to pay your bills. But I think the more that you can learn and the more valuable you can become earlier on, money is not going to be an issue for you later on. But I think a lot of people just chase the earning path and they're not learning as much. And so then later on, they're either burnt out or they're not as valuable. And so I mean, sorry, I could talk about this stuff for a lot, but it's kind of where I get some of the stuff from.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that last piece kind of stuck out to me because I think that something that's pretty prevalent for a lot of young people right now is a sense of oh man, the term's escaping me really, really hard right now. Imposter syndrome. So like if we can do some things to help kind of combat that idea too, like equipping yourself well, looking to strong resources and, exercising what you've learned in practicality, then, then you can combat that sense, and, grow and develop in that way. I like that a lot. Um, well, tell me about LinkedIn and how you use it, because for me, I think I kind of had a similar connection to you, like in college, where it was a requirement for, whatever professional development course or whatever it might be. And that's still a lot of how I look at it. I don't tend to peruse it and look through, but like if I see somebody at the company that I work at has gotten a promotion, it's to offer them a like and stuff like that. But like, tell me, how do you use it? Because the posting for 400 days in a row is doing that just period, like on Instagram or wherever. That seems intimidating to me. But doing it on LinkedIn, because there's um, the work professional component there, that seems even more intimidating. So tell me about LinkedIn and your relationship with it.
LinkedIn has definitely changed my life. I'm not even like exaggerating. It basically anything that I'm doing now came from LinkedIn at some level. The amount of personal connections that I've made, money that's come from it, ideas for a podcast. It is a global network that has an unbelievable amount of opportunities. Now, I do want to be very clear. I work for an organization that encourages posting on LinkedIn. It's not like, hey, you need to post on LinkedIn, but nobody at work, if I post, is like, dude, what are you doing? Like, why are you posting on LinkedIn? Now, granted, it also is a gold mine because we do leadership development. So that's pretty interesting. If you work in an accounting firm, that's awesome. And you do really important work. But if you post about your accounting work, nobody cares.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I do have like this advantage there. But the biggest advantage from LinkedIn is that nobody posts on it. It is a virtual resume and you just post about when you get promoted. And so I think it just crossed 1% of people. There's like over 1 billion users on LinkedIn, but only 1% of people are regularly posting something that's not like a job promotion. And so imagine Instagram, if everyone had Instagram, but you were like the only person posting on there. Well, you're probably going to grow really fast because there's got to be content to look at somewhere.
Yeah.
And so over the last 2.5 years, I'm one of the only people that's posting on there. And so that's just a lesson of like seeing an opportunity in like a market that is just like begging for people to jump into and doing it. Now, I wasn't the first to do it. I actually was just scrolling on there and sending a connection request to every person in HR in the United States of America. You probably get those. This is back in 2020 because I was selling them WildSpark. But as I was scrolling on there, I started seeing people almost treat it like a Twitter, but with like a little bit more inspiration and like a little bit more of a bend towards work, but also talking about like their families and what's important to them in life and their side hustles. And obviously they all worked at organizations that were like at some level supportive of this. And I know that some organizations might not be, they may have a caveat at the bottom that, hey, I work at this company, we do this XYZ thing, but like my LinkedIn stuff is separate from that. This is not like a reflection of the company, whatever. But like, I started seeing them do that. And at first I actually kind of like thought it was kind of cringe. I was like, what in the world are they talking about? But then at work, again, this goes back to why I'm so grateful for my organization, WildSpark. One of our VPs here said, hey, there's some organizations that have done really well with this. They have about 20 employees, but people think that they have 500 because 5 of their people are really active on LinkedIn. He was like, I want to try that. So for the last 2.5 years, we've had a couple of people that are like super active on LinkedIn. And the last several hires we've had came inbound because they were like, wow, this seems like an awesome place to work. Like, this is awesome. And so
because people were so outspoken.
Exactly. And so it is, I mean, I have mentors from LinkedIn, people that I've been able to mentor, people that have come to work to WildSpark, financial opportunities like that. So the world is your oyster. I suck at saying that word, but with LinkedIn, it's just this like sea of opportunity that nobody's leaning into. And I know that other people have barriers to entry that I don't have, but it's been, I could talk about LinkedIn for forever.
It's so interesting. You mentioned like the cringe component of like, like I don't really know how to relate to it. I think more and more it's becoming clear of like what it's meant for. Like there's different ways to connect and like be able to share. But I like what you said a lot too about like the recruitment kind of element of, not that you guys were misleading, but that because there were so many people like sharing their experiences and posting on LinkedIn, like that kind of helped to attract some like-minded people for hiring. That's a really cool thing. Like the main thing that I kind of see in my workplace is like sharing like wins like for the company. Like
Mm-hmm.
if there is, new product that's done really well, or like just general like sales and stuff like that, like a lot of those articles like get shared, or like personal growth, like stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about it in a different framework, because it's not something that I'm used to. I like hearing about that a lot. And in HR, I've been it's a lot of what I'm doing is kind of assisting with some of the recruiting elements. So I think there's some application there. If that's what I intend to do, is it, then we can grow that and we can learn it. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, well, tell me, what about the podcast did not come to you as easily? What did you identify like, I'm not so good at this and I need to get better at it? 'Cause you mentioned the learning piece, like leading yourself before leading others. So what did you identify that, like, I got some room to grow here?
So I think this was super kind of God to give me this idea, but I have gotten a little worried over the last couple of years as I've been in the leadership development space, and I have these books behind me. And I listen to podcasts and I post on LinkedIn and I have a podcast of like, do I believe this stuff? Am I living it out? Or do I just like listening to myself talk because I bought a microphone?
Mm,
Like, so that was the biggest thing, is practicing what I'm preaching, because um man, you can have like a skill set to be able to galvanize and try to like motivate and inspire people, but leadership is like way more about who you are than what you do. And some of the best leaders I know are introverted and they don't like having the microphone, and those are some of the best leaders I know. It's not always the person that can just stand in front of people. And that's a big part of like my story. My whole life, I feel like, has just been trying to like be the guy that stands in front of people and talk, because I
mm,
like being in the spotlight and it's all about me. And so like I built my own kingdom when I got to college, and that was all my focus. And I kind of got a fresh start from high school. Any Vestavia people who are like Hampton Dortch, like if you think poorly of me from high school, I would have too. Um, and so I don't blame you. But like going to college, I had a fresh start. Ironically, I went 7 minutes down the road to Sanford, but nobody from Vestavia goes there. And so I spent all of my energy and effort doing the things that I knew I was supposed to be doing, and earning the approval of other people in all these different leadership positions and everything. And at some level, went through a lot of hardships midway through college. And that's what made me realize, oh, well, it's because you're just living for yourself, buddy. You're making it all about
mm,
you. And that's not fulfilling. And maybe people don't see that right now because you're good at masking it, but eventually everybody will know. And so you have a
yeah.
decision to make. And so my faith is a huge part of that. Roundabout way to answer your question, before I ventured into this new part of the podcast, I think this was really kind of God to give me an idea to say, hey, buddy, you need to live this out, or you're just going to be talking to a screen and you're not really going to believe it. And then you're not going to be worth listening to. And so the idea that I had is something called Friday Five, where I found 5 guys, 4 other guys, 2 of them went to Vestavia, 2 other guys. So 5 total. We meet at 5 a.m. We do 50 push-ups. We run 5 miles, then we do 50 more push-ups, and then we sit around a fire. So yes, I'm really cheesy with my F themes here, but
Nice.
we sit around a fire and we talk about faith, family, fitness, fellowship, and future every single Friday morning at 5 a.m. And there's no excuses because nobody has anything going on at 5. And that has been the biggest highlight, other than having a daughter, of my life over the last 6 weeks as I've started this. And so I would say, to answer your question, the biggest weakness, frustration, thing I didn't expect was, hey, you're decent at talking to a microphone and some people will listen to you. But if you want this to be sustainable, and if you want to be worth following, and if you want to be believable, then you need to live this out yourself, and you need to have accountability here. And so now I have real life accountability weekly on each of these topics, and it's made it all that much more worth it for me to do.
Nice. I love that. I really love what something that you touched on about the self accountability in sharing like the content and like kind of preaching to yourself. I think that's something that's really important to be able to do. Because I don't know, it can feel like before you start doing that, for at least for me, that it's like I'm being a hypocrite here. Like by saying this stuff out loud and not living it out, I'm outing myself as someone who can't do that. But in reality, I think that it is good to do those things, like to say like here's something that you ought to be doing, and like but like you said, like the content without intention or action is just entertainment. But like there's something special there about like preaching to yourself in that way. And I love the accountability too of that smaller group. So we're recording this on a Thursday, so you'll be heading out tomorrow morning to do that. Or wait,
Yes,
actually,
sir.
okay, it is Thursday. I'm losing track of everything here. But yeah, I love that. That's great. That yeah, that's awesome. Sorry to give you so many that's cools, that's awesomes.
No, no,
But
you're
I love
good.
that. Something that I like to ask everybody is, what impact have you seen yourself making? Obviously, in the leadership space, you're going to be touching a lot of different folks in a lot of different ways. But is there anything that's kind of surprised you, like coming back, like, oh wow, it's cool that I made a connection with this person in this way?
I would say from the podcast and from LinkedIn, I've been really encouraged because typically the people that are impacted the most are the ones that you have no idea are watching or listening.
Mm,
And I've had a lot of people over the years maybe message me later on, like, hey, I've really appreciated what you've shared from LinkedIn. And they've never liked it. They've never commented on it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know you were seeing that. And then with my podcast, even like, I think some like distant relatives that I don't get to talk to have been listening to it. And it's funny because I say it's like for ambitious young professionals, and my wife's side of the family, they're all in California, and I have like 9 grandparents over there. They're all incredible and I love them dearly. But I think that it's been a cool opportunity for them to listen to me, like their grandson-in-law that lives in
yeah.
freaking Alabama. And I think that some of the stuff that I've been able to share about faith has been, that's what I'm most proud of. Obviously not because of myself, but just because of the work that God has done in my life. And now I'm able to share that. And I've just been able to share some pretty practical frameworks that I've learned. And one thing that I realized is I think living in Birmingham, Alabama can be dangerous because, you know, I would say we're in like the buckle of the Bible Belt, or just
Mm,
because like you live here and you're a nice person, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian.
hmm.
Um, and I would have said that too, but I've really learned like what it actually looks like to follow God. And so
Yeah.
being able to share some of those things, I think has gone a long way for some people. And I'm really just, the cool part is I'm preaching to myself like 6 years ago, you know? And so there's somebody 6 years behind me that's hearing that. And I think it's resonating.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of people would have had similar experiences to you, in that Birmingham, I have always felt, is kind of insular. It is easy to just get caught up with, keeping up with, Tanglewood or whatever. But yeah, it was something affirming that I kind of felt in like going out. Just getting out of Birmingham, like I went to college in Tennessee, and like it helped me to appreciate it in coming back. Um, so I love that, and I love that you've gotten to connect with folks in different way, and especially like on a family level, like, oh, like, yeah, like I got to do this. I had a cool conversation with my uncle when he was in, everybody's in town for Christmas. He was like, yeah, like I like the way that you interview and stuff like that, and we got to be talking about some of the guests and stuff, and it was cool. It was cool to be able to share that. Um, yeah, I love getting to foster those connections and using the podcast as a tool for that. It's a cool thing. I think it makes it worth it in and of itself, that no matter what it looks like down the road. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Well, tell me, what do you think is in the future for Wake Up and Lead?
Ooh, good question here. This came organically, and it came from LinkedIn, not Wake Up and Lead, but there is someone I know from LinkedIn. It's this guy who is a CEO of a company in Nashville, and I had been connected to him for a while. And he actually, this was one of the biggest honors that I've gotten. But he actually asked me to mentor his son like 2 years ago, and this guy goes to Alabama, and so me and this college student, his name's Harry. We keep in touch and talk a lot, and I've been able to help him through some spiritual stuff, some fitness stuff, some career path desires. And so people always ask like about my podcast or LinkedIn. They're like, how are you monetizing? And like, I mean, there's some elements to that I wouldn't say that's like the massive intent, but in the future, there I could see there being some opportunities for more of that. Having just some younger guys where, and not that it has to be someone that's like in college, but that's just what I've done. And I would be fired up to be able to, find a freshman, sophomore, junior in college that's just trying to find the right path and just kind of talk them through some of that stuff. So if I were to like try to pick a lane and turn it into some level of like business, if you will, I would probably kind of cater it towards, yes, this is helping young professionals, but for college students who are really needing to be acting like young professionals or about to be one, here's what to expect and here's some mindsets to have.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I think that goes very, very nicely, like in hand with your mission too, is, helping with young professionals. But the folks that are kind of immediately turning into the young professionals are the folks that need that practice the most. And I like that. Yeah, there's something about young people, like high school and college age, that something that resonates with me. Like, it's a very transitional part of your life. You're finding out so much about yourself and your faith and everything like that. That it's cool to watch them navigate, even if you're just along and like being a listening ear. It's very cool to watch them blossom into the people that they're going to be. Because I don't know, it's I'm at a point now where a lot of the kids that were in my cabins and stuff at camp, they are now like announcing like their college like intentions, or like I had a couple of guys that are now, they're doing their visit announcements, and they're like trying on like different football gear and doing like the graphics and stuff. I'm like, dang, that's so cool that all of these kids are like 5 inches taller than me and like 20 pounds heavier. And they're like obviously there's the physical difference, but then there's the developmental differences too, of like, wow, they're like pursuing college athletics, or they're doing this kind of field. There's something inherently rewarding about working with young people. I think it's really awesome what you're doing.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a bunch of fun.
So love that. Well, last question here. And this is a tradition that I kind of goofed up on in the last couple episodes, because I don't think that I took down the question from the previous episode. But basically, what we give everybody the opportunity to do is ask a question to the next guest. So it's my fault for not perpetuating the cycle here, but we'll rebuild and move on now. One of our previous guests, Kendall, she asked, if you could pick a new career, what would it be? Where would you go?
So that's going to be that's for me. Pick a new career.
That's for you. And then I'll give you the opportunity to ask your question to whoever comes next.
If I could pick a new career, I would start my own business. I don't know if I can tell you exactly what that is, but I would come up with something. And if somebody was like, you have to start it today, I would probably I would hammer down on Wake Up and Lead and like finding the reason I say college students is, one, I feel like I can help a lot because that was just me. But also transparently, college students, certain ones, their parents are willing to invest in them. And I think I could make a business out of that. So if I had to make a business today, it would be that. I don't think that like long-term I'm wanting to build like some sort of coaching network or something like that. So, but if it had to be that today, I would do that. But I don't think that there's like another job that I would want to do. I would definitely want to start my own thing. I don't know if that's an entertaining answer, but
No,
yeah.
I love that. Episode that is not out yet, but will be the one that comes out before this was well, actually, no, Wesley's episode came out yesterday, so that one is available. That's my fault there. But he started his own uh, exterior services business. So it started out as pressure washing, but now he does stuff like during the holiday season, putting up lights and stuff like that. And it was really cool to get his perspective on entrepreneurship and everything like that. It was a great episode. Great getting to talk to him. But yeah, I love that. So what do you think that you would ask the next guest?
Of course I'm going to go deep here. I can't not help it. I believe that we are all liars and we lie to ourselves all the time. And so my question would be to the next person, they'd be like, geez, dude, what are you lying to yourself about?
Ooh, I like that. I think it's a good like telling question. It kind of cuts straight through. Yeah,
we'll see what they share on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see the level of vulnerability they're willing to step into.
I love that. Yeah, and I hope that we achieve a certain level of vulnerability on the show, and that's one goal there. But yeah, absolutely. Well, Hampton, thank you so much for being a guest. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up for the episode?
A couple things we hit on. One, if you wait for all your ducks to be in a row, it'll be too late. It'll never happen. So start the thing. Just do it. Just take action. I promise you, you will not regret it. And then the other part is a lot of you probably did. We talked about this too. You probably did do some cool things in high school and college if you win, and serving at camps and youth groups and everything. If you're in a role right now, you're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole and you see that being the path of the next few years, don't just accept that that's what it is, because then you'll probably just end up being the next manager that somebody doesn't like. So I really would just challenge you to whatever leading yourself means to you. I'm not going to say listen to my podcast. If you think that'll be helpful, great. But at the end of the day, like I said about fitness, we know what we need to do for the most part, for leading yourself, for getting your act together, for doing your best. Like, we know what we need to do, and you just need to do it. So whatever it is that you know you need to do, just go do it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Hampton, for coming on. It's been a total pleasure to sit and talk with you and catch up, and look forward to connecting in the future. That'll be great. But that's gonna conclude episode 30 of When I Was Your Age. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have made it this far, throw it up on the story. Say that, like, hey, I made it through all an hour and 13 minutes of this show. That would be a really crucial piece. But thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.